here with Ben Cardin, and you're saying the action moves to the Senate. It kind of already has. I wish you could see. We're just surrounded by cameras and microphones and all sorts of things. Senator, let's talk about what was going on in your Democratic caucus. What is Harry Reid telling you all you're going to be voting on? After all, if you don't put something on the floor by midnight tonight, the clock starts ticking. That means the vote moves beyond Monday.
Now, we're going to have on the floor the Reid proposal that would allow us to extend the debt ceiling through 2012, that has over $1 trillion of spending cuts, has an additional $1 trillion in the overseas account with the interest savings that can get us through 2012. That's going to be on the floor. We hope that we'll be able to add to that some of the suggestions of the Republican leader, McConnell, and that we can get a bipartisan agreement to move this as early as starting this evening.
Well, we know that Republicans will be, there was sort of a let's make a deal aspect of this. Republicans wanted this in two steps. That's what's one part of the Boehner plan. You all wanted this to be a one-step process. In the art of compromise, what trigger are you willing to agree to that would impose real spending caps so that they'll give you the one-time raise?
And we're not.
What will you give up?
Right. We are absolutely committed to doing what's known as the grand bargain, to try to get us to $4 trillion of deficit reduction over the 10-year period. We need to do that. But it's important to have predictability in the markets. We can't allow this to happen again during this Congress. So it's critically important that there's predictability on raising the debt cap through 2012. As far as how we get to the full amount of deficit reduction, that won't be in one step. It will take more than one step.
Okay, so now we're going to try a little exciting thing. Senator Portman, come on
Lizzie,
in.
how are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
All right, we have
Ben?
now Senator Cardin, Senator Portman.
We'll work it out right here.
I want to talk with you all about this idea of a trade-off, because we are hearing Senator Cardin say we know that they want one vote to get us through the end of 2012. What do you all want that could actually forge a compromise where you would see a spending trigger that would produce real cuts and that would bring Republicans on board?
Yeah. Lizzie, I think the issue, and I want to hear from Ben on this, but the issue is cuts, and are they real and are they meaningful? And right now we have a situation where both Speaker Boehner and Leader Reid have agreed to certain spending cuts in what's called the discretionary spending, which is the annual spending Congress handles, but nothing in terms of the entitlement spending, and therefore not enough spending cuts to take us over that longer period of time, following the formula that the debt limit should only be extended for as long as there is serious and real cuts.
Well,
so that's why the two-step process is viewed as necessary, because there needs to be a separate process with a joint committee of Congress to look at these longer-term structural problems, including in these important entitlement programs that everybody understands, including the president, need to be addressed to deal with the long-term deficit and debt problem. So that's the reason for the two-step. It's not because people like two steps better than one step. It's that there need to be real and substantial cuts. And in this first stage, we frankly do not have a consensus on what they can be.
So what if we did this? What if the Entitlement Examination Committee, that's essentially part of the Boehner bill, has the ability to make cuts to the entitlement programs?
Right.
And they have the statutory authority to do that, not just the Blue Ribbon Commission authority. We've seen 1 million of those.
Right.
Would you all agree to a $2.5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling if you saw that language where they had the ability to make entitlement cuts?
Well, if they made the cuts, but that's the question, is how do you get the committee to have consequences for not completing its work and having Congress actually vote on these necessary reductions? And so let's be honest, as you say, we've had a lot of commissions and committees and so on. You need it to have real teeth. In my view, it has to have the consequence of having the sword hanging over its head of, if they do not complete its work, that something happens. And in this case, it would be the debt limit would not be extended. If they completed their work, it would be an automatic renewal of the debt limit,
well,
just as we have had over years with budget resolutions. But this would be taking that necessary step to deal with our long-term deficit and debt problem. And if we don't do that, we have the same negative economic consequences that everyone's talking about today.
Well, with all due respect, you're talking about a sword hanging over our heads. We already have that. I want to ask you, Senator Cardin, because your state, Maryland, is on the watch list of 5 states that could be downgraded if the U.S. drops to a AA rating. And at the same time, we know that the ratings agencies are saying if we don't see $4 trillion planned out in the next 90 days, we will, in fact, downgrade the U.S. to AA. That would hit your state as well. Do you see any way to get to $4 trillion and a plan that both sides could agree on in the next 90 days?
Well, I'm not sure I would quite word it the way you did, but we have two goals. Goal one is to get through August the 2nd. We need to raise the debt ceiling. Now, we can argue what relevancy that is to deficit reduction, but we need to get that debt ceiling increased, and we need to do it through this term of Congress so we don't put our nation through what we've gone through over the last couple months. Goal two, and it's very important, we've got to manage our deficit. We've got to get our spending under control. Senator Portman's correct. We need to really consider all the items. We're not going to get that by August 2nd. We can make a significant down payment on it by August the 2nd, and we can develop a mechanism that can get us to a balanced approach. But one item you didn't ask Senator Portman about is revenues. And I'm going to tell you the Democrats are going to insist if we have a credible plan, we need to make sure that revenues are included, not raising rates, but dealing with the abuses that are in our tax code today.
Could that get Republican support?
Well, that's the idea of this committee. It's to look at really three things as I see it. One is the entitlements we talked about, structural reforms, the entitlements, which, again, there seems to be a consensus about the necessity of, but not the political will to do it. And frankly, it's not going to be done in the next 2 days. So that has to be part of this longer term. Second is tax reform. And tax reform has to include making our tax code more pro-growth, pro-investment, and improve our economy. And again, economists across the spectrum agree that can and should be done. And finally is budget reform. We need to have a budget process here. Ben and I agree on this, where we actually are going back to the regular order where we deal with these issues on the Senate floor.
You mean we don't get to do this again in September?
Well, we haven't done it for 2 years around here, and that has to be part of it. So these are things that can happen, but they will happen after. I agree with Ben, we need to extend the debt limit in this first discretionary cut period, and that can take it until, if it's $900 billion, which is what people think is in the Boehner and Reed plans, it takes it till early next year. But then there needs to be this second process, not because we need to have 2 stages, but because we need to have these substantial reductions.
All right, senators, thank you so much. We're out of time. We could do this all day long, but sadly we don't have time for that.